Guys, Roland here. Welcome to another episode of the Remember Who You Are show. And today's show, we will be talking about Earth's salvation, whether or not it's doomed or if it's not doomed. And with me is an amazing guest. You already know who it is. It's a regular on Conversations with, not Conversations with Roland. It's a regular on the Remember Who You Are show. And you get to meet them right after this. The prime directive for every human is to know thyself, which is not a discovery, it's a remembering. And that's the goal for this show, to help you remember who you are. I am your host, Roland Achenjang. Guys, indeed, I am Roland, the host of the Remember Who You Are show. And with me today is a regular, my mentor, goes by the Energy Doctor, to talk about whether or not Earth's salvation is doomed. And that's my good friend, Randy Veitenheimer. Randy, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
That's
very
awesome.
Entertaining and very good to see you.
Likewise. We've been doing this for many years, since 2019, I believe. And every time I ask, it's been like 4 years. And every time I ask how you're doing, you're always doing great. Is there like another state of being that Randy can find himself in?
Actually, what you're doing is self-programming. So one of the things I teach all my students is that if you're going to self-program, for instance, like you tell yourself, I'm good, I'm bad, right? This, that, and the other. One of the things I found out is to say I'm great is to program the body. So if you say you feel bad, then the body goes, oh, we need to, develop up neurochemistry and glandular secretions that approximate that state. The same thing if you say I'm depressed or I'm anxious, you're signaling the body to produce that neurochemistry and energy flow that produces the outcome that you're stating. So if you say you're great, even if you're not, now the body goes into, let's say, conflict, right? You've been, oh, I feel bad, I feel bad, I feel bad. And then you go, I'm great, right? So the only appropriate answer, like all the students I've ever had, the first thing to teach them is I'm great. In other words, you're going to state where you want to be. It has nothing to do where you've been, right? You can be in horrible circumstances and it's like, I'm great, right? So you're shifting your consciousness. And self-programming is something that I've been teaching because of all the things you learn, you're given a human body, but you're not taught to interact with it to any great degree. And so things like yoga, martial arts, this, that, and the other, they come along and start giving you the basic tenets of how to interact with your body, how to increase or decrease your heart rate or your blood pressure or your oxygen levels or a million other things. And so that becomes the basis for your training to learn what the heck you've been given, which is a human body. So most people ignore it. They'll tell you what education they have. And then you go, well, can you get yourself out of depression or anxiety? And, very few people can do that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm great as a gateway drug.
It is. It's very true. And for most people who don't know how to get themselves out of, maybe a depressed state with the healing power of sound and word choice, right? You're going to gravitate to medication, not meditation, or maybe you see a counselor or a therapist or something like that. But for me, I remember very well when I meditated for the first time, like a conscious meditation. Right before I started, I felt very sad because I realized for the very first time, I was actually paying attention to my body.
Yeah.
Right? Like it, and I thought for 28 years, I've had this thing everywhere I've been.
Yeah.
But but I
Right.
just never sat down to feel my toe or feel my finger or ask like, how's my hand doing? The only other times I did was maybe when I was hurt. If I cut myself and I needed to put a Band-Aid over it or scrape my knee from rough housing. But yeah, for the most part, we just go about our day like, yeah, this thing's it's gonna self-heal, it's gonna digest food, and we ignore it. We don't
Yeah.
program it, which we can.
Yeah. It's self-driving.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And let me ask you this. Earlier, you said something which popped in my mind, and this has nothing to do with Earth salvation. Or maybe it does, right? We'll see. But when you get into a conflicting situation where I just came out of the doctor's office, I've been diagnosed with diabetes. And, now my whole life, I've now been saying, I am diabetic. I am diabetic. But now I have diabetes. And in a situation like that, the idea, we've been just programmed to believe you can't cure diabetes. It's you live with it your whole life, right? Like it's for
well,
the most people. And so when you talk about, hey, you need to start speaking with the way you want to be,
right.
you could say I am without diabetes, or I don't have diabetes. I don't want to use a negative language. I want to say I am healthy,
Right.
without diabetes. I don't know how you would say that positively. I am not diabetic.
Now, denial is still connection. Okay. And one of the things that the medical will tell you, you have something. Very rarely will it tell you how you got it, and even more rare will it tell you how to get rid of it. Right. Well,
Yeah.
right. So diabetes will say is insulin uptake. Right. That's one way to just language. Well, if it's an uptake issue, well, what about calcium uptake? What about oxygen uptake? So if you take oxygen and calcium and maybe something else, then like, do you have diabetes as an outcome? So one of the things that I teach is everything is an outcome, like all the questions today. Those are outcomes. And then the question becomes like, well, where did it start and how do I not have that outcome? And so disease falls in that category to me. It's like, where
Yeah.
did you even less so, science will never answer the question of why did you get it. So science is not capable of answering a why question, right? And even if you go empirically and say, well, it's genetic and this, that, and the other, that doesn't satisfy the equations, what I call it, because somebody else in a more or less identical situation doesn't have a diabetes. So then we go, well, diabetes is an outcome of what? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychic, psychological, theory, gastrocausal, and a whole bunch we don't know. And so if you're going to fix it, we would want to know which one or combination of those. This is energy medicine, that we would alter the flow of energy. It's kind of like if you're not metabolizing sugars or glucose or whatever, then you would energize those portions of either the anatomy or the gene structure or the software. I mean, this is where nobody else goes. They just tell you, oh, you got diabetes and take this medication. And boy, that gets into a whole nother thing, like how this little medication is going to change.
I know it changed things. Yeah.
Well, it changes state. So if somebody says that you have diabetes, we will want to change the state of having, right? Remember, I'm great, right? Self-program. So we can maybe program our way out of it, but that would be logical. That would be science, right? That would be using our software to override our hardware, limitations of our hardware. And ultimately that gets into you and all the other stuff, because most people are not themselves and therefore do not have the capacity to engage themselves at the level of an illness or disease. So now we know why people have depression or anxiety, because they're not themselves to the point that they're capable of directing the information or energy necessary to not have that state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they will tell you all the reasons, right? I'm anxious because, but very rarely do they skip over the other side and go, I will not be anxious because, you see, well, here we go again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And even as far as science not being able to tell you why, I think it's because of the variability. There are just too many variables and we can't account for all of them, right? Like,
Right.
and then they'll always end up with probability. And you see that a lot with science studies, the probability that even when we decide in the medical community that we're going to approve a certain drug for usage, usually you're comparing it to other ones and you're saying the probability that it's just as effective is this, less harm, that kind of stuff. And I guess today we're going to figure out the probability that Earth's salvation is doomed
Right.
versus not.
Yeah.
And this should be an interesting conversation, Randy. And part of it has to do with, you know, a lot of things people in the spiritual community are talking about or being exposed to as you go through what you call an awakening or, you know, a remembering of who you are, kind of like the name of the show that we're on right now. But now I want us to set a context into why we're having this conversation.
Okay.
If you're okay, we'll take the context. Someone like me who was raised in the Catholic faith, and we had the whole, you know, story about a savior has come and we crucified him and he's basically died on the cross for all of us. And there's going to be a judgment day where everyone is going to be judged at the same time, like everybody. And then you're going to find out where you're going. Now, once you start getting into the spiritual community, you start being exposed to all these other areas of information, including ETs, right? And you got to love this, how the human race, who we are today, has, according to many stories, been the outcome of tampering of ET activity, right? And the goal varies. I don't know exactly what, but you hear so many things. And one of them was to speed up the evolution of the human species, whether it was for their own good, for us to mine gold, whatever the case may be, right? There's that influence. There's the other part of this, which is that these non-human entities are giving us ideas to do things with them. And what we do with those ideas is really up to us. One that is very well known and discussed all the time is nuclear power, right? Where they say, we gave you guys the idea of nuclear power and we wanted you to use it for X, Y, and Z, but you're using it for something else. We gave you the idea of free energy, but it's not available, right? And so there's this judgment like, humans, was looking down on them, kind of like, here's how you get better. But we're not necessarily doing what they expected. Then there's idea of, you know, benevolent ETs, malevolent ETs who drain our energy, who are of the light, right? And I always get touched by that because it touches on as above, so below kind of. If they're up there fighting, why should we not be fighting down here if it's kind of as above? Okay, so there's that context too, which speaks to duality as well. There's the light, there's the dark, there's the good, evil, right and wrong. And that's supposed to, I don't want to say it's supposed to, but there's the idea that it permeates all of reality, wherever you are, right? Like there's always this balance, essentially. Speaks again to the as above, so below. And to kind of not summarize, but to put all of this in a very weird state of mind is the idea that eternity, right? The absence of time, everything will always exist and it'll always change. And so when you hear that, you're like, oh, well, why bother? Why worry about anything, right? It's just another, okay, here we go. So how do you feel about that context? I don't know if it makes sense, but.
Well, it certainly gives us something to talk about. Because,
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
But
And
that's something I've been looking at, particularly lately, is because it's come up in some of the research I've been doing.
what's that you've been looking at lately?
Well, the whole concept of aging,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what started it. Like I said, I read something that a guy states these are 7 sources or causes of aging, and I couldn't come up with it as any of those were true. So, and then if you take time, even that has to function through you. And
Mm-hmm.
so time, we would say, doesn't really exist except as a relationship. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and and then we would say it's unique to each person. So, like you said earlier, like I could say 10 seconds, you say 10 seconds, and we'll be interacting with time differently. Okay, uniquely. And once you do that, then now you open up to, well, is aging a time function, or is it literally a software issue or a hardware issue? Which opens up the idea that maybe we've been modified or made modifications. Um, if you read some of the ancient literature, they talk about people living hundreds or thousands of years. And so something's true. Either that's true or what we are now is true, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I said, it gets into a very interesting conversation. Like I said, that's what I've been researching for the last month or two. So
That's neat. And it is kind of the last, as we go down this rabbit hole, it's the last topic we're going to spend some time on. And I think it makes sense then because, right, you go through all these things that essentially are going to make you worry, 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 worry. Then you get to this factor that says, well, nothing ever ends. Things just
yeah,
change. And then you
yeah,
go, oh, I
yeah,
didn't need to worry, right? So,
yeah.
yeah, we'll begin with the most obvious question, Randy, is when you hear salvation, ascension of the
Yeah.
planet, like what does that evoke within you as emotions or even images? Like what do you
Uh,
see? What do you feel?
it makes me crazy. Okay, and I'll tell you, because salvation is a theology, and so is ascension. So when you buy into a theology, you've bought into what I call a closed set. In other words, I'm going to accept this information and deny all other information, right, of that nature. So if I say I'm a Catholic or Muslim or anything else, I've denied the other, 4,000 religions on the planet, we'll call it, and as irrelevant. And not only that, I'm then the holder of absolute truth, right? So that becomes a problem, mainly because it's a closed set. This I've got a book I've been writing for 6 or 8 years now called, you know, theory of proximate reality, and it deals with set theory that your reality is very limited, but the universe itself is unlimited. So, we get into that unlimited concept when they start talking about gods, but they generally don't talk about humans that way, unless they're trying to sell you a $3,000 course. We won't name names. So,
Feel
um,
free, man.
yeah,
This is no holds bar conversation.
it's
Uh,
you know it's interesting to me that you would have all these closed sets, meaning ideas about who you are, what you think, what is important to you, and in the process deny all the ones that may hold the answers. I'll put it that way, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, as an example, if we go out to the duality of the universe, there's we'll call it red and blue, right? And we say, what do you mean red and blue? Well, we're Crips or Bloods. Oh, I'm sorry, we're Democrats or Republicans. Oh, you see what I mean? It's just like, so ultimately, it boils down to one thing: you give meaning to things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you give meaning to things based on a closed set of your experiential being forever how many years you're on the planet so far, right?
Yeah.
Now, experiential being and experiential knowledge is what is basically called non-valid. Okay. It has information for you, it has reference to you, but it has no validity to anybody else. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
if we want to jump right into it, as an example, the majority of UFO sightings and abductions all have a high degree of correlation. They have a very high degree of correlation. In other words, it's the same story, and that makes us really suspicious that millions of people would have the same story to tell. Because if that's true, then it's a program. It's not.
So
It's a program, right?
yeah. Okay.
So
Now,
yeah, go ahead.
well, so when you talk about things being a program, that
Right.
kind of actually feeds into this question a little bit. If
Yeah.
salvation is a program,
Right.
right? If the stories that we're telling ourselves are all programs at that point, and then if they are, you have to ask who is programming it, right? What's the if I'm limited to just being human, I'm always going to think, but what's the value to the programmer to program such a program and then disseminate it, right?
Right.
And maybe there's no value, maybe there's no benefit, but as a human, I'm thinking, if I'm going to go through this length of creating a salvation story, of creating a savior type story, what's in it for me as another entity that most likely is not human? Because I don't think, well, I may be wrong. Maybe we're the ones programming this for ourselves, but who knows, right? So what's the value there? What's the benefit of it if it were the case?
Well, always we say all action creates the basic language creates friction, which creates heat. Okay, all action creates heat. All right. So now you have the universe. So when you do an action, an act of contrition, I think what Catholics call it, you're creating an energy flow, and you're right in asking, well, the proper question is, where's the energy go? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like even if I have a thought, positive or negative, well, I've engendered a polarity of the energy I have, the life force I have. And it would be appropriate to say, well, who's the recipient or what is the recipient of that? So when you look at let's go to Ascension. It's a 4,000-year-old religion out of Egypt. Very simple. And then we go, well, what relevance does it have today? And to me, it has none, right? So, but we could talk about as you go through life, you basically are adding data, you're adding information to your hard drive, soft drive, the cloud, whatever, karma, Akashic record. You give it some name, and then once you have that information, you have expanded beyond your previous state of less information. Okay, that's not ascension, that's expansion. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Expansion doesn't have a particular direction or goal. Okay. Ascension says that up is up. Right. And you look at that and go, well, if up is up, where am I at right now? And if I can't determine where I'm at, how the hell do I know which way is up? Right. And then having reached what we call an up state, right? This is quantum physics, spin state. What good is it, right? Now, let's say I went to, I don't know, somebody named Joe's thing on Ascension for $3,000, which a couple thousand people in England did. 3-day seminar, and you come out ascended. Well, okay, now go back home and tell your wife or husband that.
Well, I
And
think,
it's like it has no value, right?
yeah,
But the energy went somewhere. Okay.
yeah,
So your actions of doing activity associated with ascension or salvation or any others that are out there, and there's a bunch of them, all results in energy flow going somewhere. And that becomes a critical question. Where's the energy go? Who ends up with it? Right?
mm-hmm,
Just while we're on it, it's like who dreamed up the brilliant idea of burnt sacrifices, burnt offerings, Judaism, right? I
yeah,
mean, and then you go like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Now we get a critical issue. At the time, it seemed important, okay, to those people who developed that system, that program.
mm-hmm,
So if you look at all programs out there, and we can call them religions and politics and a whole bunch of other things, it's like who came up with it and to what benefit was it to hold those ideas in mind? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So that's how we got to where we are. So,
It's true. I mean, those are the questions I'm asking myself today,
yeah.
right? Which is, if you think about it from that standpoint, and you say, let's look at the willing participants in any of these theologies, closed sets of beliefs, right? Whether you feel human or, burnt offering sacrifices was a bad idea, or it doesn't make sense to you right now, right? It makes me want to question individual freedoms and free will. And
Uh-huh.
and a great idea there has to do with, okay, most people who would say we need to worry about our salvation and ascension or save the planet, right? We need to raise the planet is going into a different, we all need to do it and blah, blah, blah. I wonder, after a while, won't you end up creating some sort of hierarchical structure that you're fighting against today? Like,
Right.
it's very easy for me to look at the Catholic Church and say, these people have created some sort of hierarchy where you've got,
Yeah. All of
the
that.
Pope, everything. Now, imagine, Randy, you were like, instead of ascension, let's talk about expansion. And then all of a sudden, millions of individuals were like, expansion is the way to go.
Right.
They're all going to be looking at whoever started that idea, which is Randy. And then eventually, you, Randy, you're not going to be able to attend to a million people. So you start delegating, and saying, you in Louisville, you want to talk about Randy? Here's a certified Randy expert who understands ascension, right? You go out there to the locals, and so you're going to end up in a very similar structure, which is what you're actually fighting today. You see what I mean? Like over time. And so how does then individual freedoms play into this? Because I'm saying, let's say we want ascension to go, is there a stripping of individual freedoms, individual free will, or is there not a
Yeah. Right.
stripping of individual freedoms and free will?
Okay. So just to create emotion in your audience, all religions are based on fear. All religions are based on circumscribing sex. All religion, meaning they have rules against it or for it. It just, there's about 5 of them. I worked that out years ago and got in big trouble when I started talking about it because it wasn't popular. But I had a theologian, a priest, and he said, what you said of those 5 is none of them are true. And I go, explain to me which ones aren't true, which ones don't use fear as a basis for their religion or their programming, right? And so when you look at it, it's like, well, fear has punishment, which means a limited universe again versus an unlimited. So expansion becomes the only way out of it. It's like you can acknowledge that that exists without having to participate. And non-participation, we only have to go back to the Inquisition. That's non-participation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at our history and stuff, it's like all these are invalid as a way to lead a life, right? And and what you got into was what we call a deterministic, non-deterministic universe, and that's in quantum physics, but we'll call it free will. Okay, so in a deterministic universe, everything is plotted out. There's not much deviation that it can occur. Think about it as you follow the equations, is what I call them. And if you don't follow the equations, you're a deviant, or you're deviating from the program. And if you're deviating from the program, we kick you out. Like if you have cancer, which I've worked with a lot of people, and they don't have cancer anymore. The doctors and establishment doesn't want to talk to them. They want to talk to people that have cancer, not people that don't have it anymore. Right?
That's so funny. That's so funny, though. I'm sorry, I have to cut you off there. Can you imagine going to the doctor just to visit, like, I'm healthy, right? Like,
I went to my doctor, I don't know, a few months ago. It's like, she couldn't find anything wrong. It's like, and it's not that there might not be things wrong, but I'm more or less normal for my age. We'll put it that way, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so then, if there's nothing to fix, well, see you next year. You see what I mean? That's what they, right? And I thought that was pretty funny, because it's kind of like they're chomping at the bit to fix you, right?
Yeah.
So now they're in the same category as people that think the world needs to be saved. All right?
Randy, we have to talk about this. Okay, I'm sorry, we do.
This is the rule. Dr. Hawkins one time in one of his lectures said the universe doesn't need to be saved. Okay, number one, right? And now we go to quantum physics and talk about quantum collapse. Okay, so even in a deterministic, non-deterministic universe, refer people to the Schrodinger's cat experiment. The idea that all forces and all energies and all effort and everything that it includes the totality of the universe collapses in every moment. A moment's a very specific amount of time, by the way. And so from that moment, it opens back up to include everything in the universe. And then the next moment, it collapses again. So now we have a fluctuation, a rhythm. We have a frequency, we have a vibration. Everything is contained in that collapse and non-collapse. So at every given moment, the universe can't be different, because that moment is now the past. It cannot be different. There's nothing you can do, theoretically. We can make some exceptions there, as everything. But you cannot change it. So now you go, Randy, against the totality of the universe, and the next moment I'm going to change it, right? And believe it or not, sometimes it works. So, and that's the anomaly, because we have some hint of that, and the reason we know that is because we have some desire to change things. Okay, so in a deterministic universe, we can't change it. Non-deterministic, theoretically, we can, but if we go back to quantum physics and the idea of a coin and that series I did for Gaia, is that 0 and 1 reality are connected by the in-between, right?
Yeah.
And so the in-between becomes where all the action is.
Yeah.
Now, all evolution depends on the in-between. All expansion depends on the in-between. It depends on not being here or being there, but being open to wherever there might be.
And I can tell you this, Randy, here is just there without a T.
Yeah. And like I tell people, there is no there, right?
Yeah, there's no there.
Throw that out the window. So even then, the idea of expansion or ascension or salvation, all that goes straight out the window. Okay, so
let's talk about a couple of things here, right? Before we get to the nothing to fix portion of this, I want us to talk about the entire universe collapsing and reopening in a moment. And where you mentioned that sometimes we have, let me not say sometimes, we always have the opportunity to change it, right? When it's open before it collapses in the in between. And sometimes we realize it. And when we do, that's when we're super surprised. And if you've paid any attention to some of these viral videos that go online where people are doing sort of impossible shots, like trying to throw a penny into a piggy bank from, 10 meters away, and they're sitting there with 1,000 pennies, and they're just throwing and recording it, and then all of a sudden one goes in, and they're like, right? Yeah. So to me, that when you talk about that, that's what it feels like. Or if you're successful, if you hit the lotto, for instance, or if you ask a girl out and she says yes, right? That's that collapse, or vice versa, etc.
Yeah, collapses in a moment. Sometimes people say, "What do you do?" Well, I can tell you what I do is I try to alter the flows of energy, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the proper question is, where do I do that in between one moment and the next? Okay, and that is what we call a quantum, right? That's the definition. So, and so when we look at that, most people don't operate in the in between. They operate moment to moment, we'll call it, and of course, all potential agents of change are contained in the in between. They're not contained in the previous state or the next state. And as an example, I took my daughter one time to one of the little game places where you buy tickets and punch buttons and play whatever. And they had this machine that was about 6 or 8 feet in diameter, had a light going around the edges, like blink, 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 blink all the way around. Maybe 300 or 400 different lights. And she played it and didn't win anything. The idea was you had to hit the button, right? And if you hit the button at a right point, you got like thousands of these little tickets, And she got kind of frustrated with it. And I said, let me try, right? So I hit the button and did it, what we would call in collapsed reality in the moment. And then I switched to the in-between, because the in-between is connected to the next moment, right? And I had my hand up and I hit the button when the light was about maybe 10 or 12 lights away from where it would be actualized. And when I hit the button, it collapsed into that exact point where we got, 10,000 tickets or something. And she just looked at me and I said, you got to play where the answer is. So the majority of answers, I'll throw it out there, are contained in the in-between, because the in-between is infinite. And here we go again. The in-between is unlimited, whereas both sides of the equation are very limited, right?
Yeah.
And so all religions and all ideologies and all all isms reflect a limited, not only consciousness, but you are placing limits on the universe itself. And so then we go to what we call the truth. If you're a Catholic or Muslim, it's absolutely true, and you should accept it as the truth and not consider yourself with any other potential answer to the universe, because otherwise you make yourself crazy, right?
There you go. Yeah. So let's follow that logic, right? Because if you were, say, labeled as somebody who's here to help the earth ascend with ascension, right? Yeah. What you just said was, if you label yourself as that, agree to it, and then stand by that and just move forward, right? Good. So let's play the thought experiment. Now you're in this group. You talked about deviance in the past, where we're now looking through. We have our pyramid structure, right? We're in our pyramid structure. Everybody here is basically in alignment with this idea of this is what we are and this is
Right.
how we do it. And
That's
to
set.
remain in that, and to remain in that pyramid, you're going to kick deviants out. If you don't buy to what we say, if you don't buy to what we believe, how we act, if you try to introduce new ideas, we're going to say that's not how it was, that's not how we do it, that's not how it was, right? So you end up creating again this structure that indirectly, correct me if I'm wrong, creates an opportunity for someone to try to fix, to say, hey, you need to expand your consciousness.
Right.
Okay. So this is really why I'm asking this question about the earth's salvation, because the people who are trying to salvage the earth are just creating the same environment that the people that are trying to salvage the earth from created, which gave them the opportunity to say.
Right. Yeah, for 1995, I can give people my PayPal. They can text me for instant ascension. And I'm sorry to charge so much, but that's just the way it is.
Yours is instant? Are you
Yeah, or instant salvation. I really deal in salvation. I mean, I'll even give you a certificate for it, right? So contact me.
Is it notarized, Randy?
Yeah, we'll do the whole show. Put a gold star on it or something. So yeah, then the question becomes is, what are you getting by self-identification? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Self-alignment. Okay. And those two things, if you like, when I say I'm Randy, it's what I call an ultimate expression of whatever file folder name they gave me when I was born. But in that file folder is all my data. And so that's a data set, and it's open because it's ongoing. It only becomes closed when I die. Now, it only becomes closed when I die to those people that are still alive, for the most part, because it doesn't mean that that information disappeared. In other words, that information set of, Nostradamus still exists. And you can tap into that, and that gets into another area where science only discovers things. Art creates things. There's a big difference. We talk about scientific discovery. We don't talk about artistic expression that much. So now everybody wants to try to make religion into a science. In fact, I think there's one called that, Scientology or something. And so when you look at that, they're making religion into a science, and it's just not true. You can't do it. Okay, you can't use a scientific type, we'll call it attitude, or development, or formula to do creation, because creation is an act of artistic expression, we'll call it. So God wasn't a scientist. We'll just throw that out. Yes.
But I thought God was everything, Randy.
Yeah, but may have been an artist, right?
I thought God was everything.
When you get into it that way, like I went to all these science and conscious conferences, and I used to just laugh because they're, what they call it, oil and water. There's no mixing of it. And oil paint, they made a mixable oil paint, we'll call it, but it's very rare. So that inherent polarity, that inherent duality, is that you can't reach what we call a spiritual state through any scientific endeavor. Right? It's impossible. Yeah. It's not an out. And then if I do something artistic, I can't explain it scientifically. It's beyond science. And so the language and the energy doesn't translate. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, the value is determined by your own idea of self that gives value to things. So when we give value to, say, I'm Randy, but then we say I'm a scientist, I'm a artist, I'm a Republican, Democratic, red blood, something. I have placed myself into smaller and smaller, we used to call it pigeonholes. And eventually I get down to a frame of reference. And boy, this, if you're doing meditation, this is kind of like what direction you want to go. You want to get down to where your frame of reference, literally, if nothing else, becomes neutral. That's not ascension. That's not going the other way, descension, right? If you have one, you have to have the other. And
You do. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, same thing. If you have salvation, you have those which are not capable of salvation. So here comes an interesting comment. Dr. Hawkins said something to the effect that salvation is for those who have no hope, right? Now, hope to me is one of the things in Pandora's box and represents a state of fear, right? It's a polarity thing. So for those who have no hope and no ability of salvation, right? We say that there may be an exit to the right or the left, right? Or up or down. Here we go, the polarities again, in or out, that affords one the opportunity to not experience their state of being at the time, which is generally given as a negative, and why they would desperately seek salvation or ascension there, right? It represents a quantum jump in consciousness. That's all.
Yeah. Sorry, Randy. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, it's just that we hold out that. At a base level, all humans hold out the possibility of salvation, meaning the possibility of divine intervention. Here we go again. What makes it divine and what, like I said, and then why? Why should I hold out for salvation? Or why should I hold out for ascension or a dozen other things, depending on which occult group or religious group is promoting it? And to me, the answers are always unequal. They're unequal to the outcome. In other words, hope is hope is sufficient in itself. Fear is sufficient in itself. And we don't look at things that way, right? Why are you afraid? I like it.
I don't know anything better. Yeah. Randy, let me ask you this about salvation, right? Because if, at least in the human form, if you experience, again, I don't know how you describe what salvation is, whether it's a divine intervening event or an awakening, or if you're floating for a second, or if you feel like you're floating, is it temporary? Do you eventually, like you said, if you went to this 3-day event, you have to come back home and, right? Okay, you're going to come back home with an expanded consciousness. But in a reality where not everybody is at that level, right? There are some challenges you're going to face. Being called a cuckoo, maybe. You're not going to be able to communicate this very well with other people.
Right.
And so the question then becomes is, what happens afterwards? What happens after you've experienced what you think salvation? Isn't it just temporary? Aren't you going to be seeking for another new level?
It's I break down time and space into facets, right? Which means like space has eight facets or whatever, time has 19. And all I'm doing is breaking it down to where we can examine it kind of like piece by piece, as opposed to trying to swallow the whole cake at a time. So if you have had an experience of resurrection, I love that one, or salvation, or ascension, you have had added an aspect or quality to your being that wasn't there before. Okay. Now, to me, it's kind of like Bitcoin. Go try to spend it. You see what I mean? It's like, in other words, there's going to be people, we know that, because in the Bible and different religious books, somebody did ascension or salvation or something, and everybody went ooh and ah, right? Ooh, ah, right?
Ooh, ah.
Walla Walla Bing Bang. Anyway, the problem is now that that's not exactly something that you can walk up to somebody and trade in what I call an energy exchange. Hey, I'm ascended. Right? Um, it's like what was one of the jokes is I'm not always enlightened, but when I am, and basically that's the whole statement because it's open ended, right?
Yeah.
And if I went up to somebody and said I'm enlightened, I love that one because you just change out the word enlightened to ascended, all these other things.
Constipated.
It's like, so what? Do you want fries with that? Or, in other words, it has no value. But for some reason, we attach meaning and value to people that can play basketball or football right now, to the level that we give them money to the degree that, you know, a Borgia or a Pope would have been just static over in the 15th century. So then you look at that and go, well, what the hell does ascension or salvation or enlightenment, all these things have been proposed throughout history. They're closed set programs to tie you up into a way of thinking and a way of being. And so all of these, I'll call them cults, no matter what name you give to them, have is that you conform to we'll say a man-made identity, right? That eliminates 99% of the universe, okay? So what we come down to is if you expand it out to the limits of being human, we would, in this lifetime, we would say you were at 1%. And the other 99% is unknown, but not unavailable. And so now we go from a physical form to what we call a I call them plasmoids. The idea that the plasma of the universe contains the other 99% of the universe. And so it's kind of like you have to get through with being human before you can go stepping over into that world. And boy, that gets into like everything that exists, ever existed, all that whole concept we come up with is God is actually what we call the plasmoid universe or plasma universe. Now, I'm just substituting words back and forth, right? You can call it God, I can call it plasma if I'm a physicist, but the idea is that once you go beyond that 1%, now you're in an expansive state and unlimited, okay? Discovery is possible in the number 1%, the number one universe. The zero universe, the plasma universe, is creativeness is possible, right? So Einstein discovered something that already existed. An artist takes everything out there and creates something that never existed. There's a big definition because ultimately our entire creation comes about out of that 99% that never existed before. Okay. Now, if that's true, then at some point we were created. I hate that.
Well, it brings up again another point, right? I mean, if you think about the framework we set at the beginning, where it's human beings came out of previous biological beings being altered, DNA was enhanced, changed, etc., etc., etc. So it's like, well, those people somebody else, some other being did it. And we've talked about, what was the value for them. But we can actually circle back to this now when we're thinking about nothing to fix. A lot of these messages that come from zero reality that we're expressing, even creativity. There's something you said I wanted to ask you about, right? Where science discovers what already exists and artists create things new. Many times they would tell you they were influenced by a song that they heard or they saw an image that they painted. And so those images somehow already existed in some reality that they're bringing through,
Right.
or something like that. But back to the nothing to fix, Randy. When we get all these messages, whether it's a programmed, like you talked about, where people were visited by beings from other planets, and it's usually telepathic communication, where they instill ideas into your head, be it Mother Earth is getting too hot, you're destroying the planet, the atmosphere, all that jazz. We need to fight to save it. Be it people who have had visitations from beings from other planets talking about, you need to spread this message so we can save humanity. Humanity is at a crossroads. We can save ourselves. If at all there is nothing to fix, why are so many people worried about the Earth and humanity and what we're doing with what I'll say is our home? Should they care? And if so, why? Really, why?
The answer is no. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The people, the Earth is a closed system. That's it. No matter what you do to it, it's not going to change all that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not by any human or human activity. It's a degree of power, we'll call it. It's called agency if we get into it. Agency is the ability to influence something, right? I want to influence the election. Well, I can cheat or I can spend a lot of money, all right? It doesn't mean that the outcome is assured. We can look backwards. But agency is that I have the power to influence, the power to program, the power to plan, the ability to engage others in my endeavors. All right. So, as an individual, what are you going to do? Can emit less carbon dioxide, right? As an example. Well, you're one of 9 billion right now, and tell me how that works. Well, now it's what we call positionality, of where you get to feel good about yourself. Well, feeling good about yourself doesn't require you to do anything. Remember, I'm great. We're back to that again. So it's a very narcissistic standpoint to think that you're going to save the planet, that you're going to save humanity, because what you've done is what we call in a state of perfection. You've also created a state of non-action. And apparently, in a deterministic and non-deterministic universe, both of them require action. Action creates friction, which creates heat. And heat is basically the exchange that we do between all aspects of our efforts in life.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked about this many times with my friends, Randy. At some level, all the problems in the world come about because we're all trying to solve all the problems in the world.
Right. Well, look at it this way. If I say, like, let me just march outside and get a sign that I'm going to save the world, right? It's like, you talk about arrogance, right?
Mm-hmm.
About a narcissistic kind of stancing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I, the ego, which is I, right, have the ability to stand against the universe, right? And all the momentum, that's what I deal in, is moment, movement, momentum, we talked about. And it's like the answer is no, right? So then we go, well, why are you doing it? And here we go. You're only doing it to attract attention to yourself. And boy, I hate that. I mean, some girl one time came to one of my lectures, and I see her after the lecture up there crying. And it wasn't me. I go up there and she got 3 or 4 young boys around her, and I go, "What's going on?" She goes, "Well, we're killing the planet. We need to save it." And I go, "No, you just need attention from these boys." God, she got mad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So underlying was the anger of not getting attention. You see what I mean? Had nothing to do with
Mm-hmm.
saving the world. So everybody that proposes you do something, right? Tithe 10% of your money, right?
Well,
It,
I love that.
yeah, it's like, well, I can recognize a benefit, and remember, we want to know where the energy flowing, right? If we want to
Yeah.
know why, real simple, you want attention. You're no different than everybody else in the universe, whether you're a child or whatever. The difference is a child learns to provide self attention. And it's something that when you get to be about 8 years old, you lose. And you're no longer able to supply self attention. So what do? You seek it in others, right? Now, let me join a cult that has at least enough people to give me the attention I want. And by the way, you got to wear certain sneakers and believe in the mothership, and oh, that's all fine with me because I've got 28 people here paying attention to me. And who
Yeah.
the hell cares what they think, right? And so we call that suspension, not of belief, but suspension of the self. We surrender the self to somebody else to manage. And boy, if you want me to go through that 10 times, right? It's like, why would I do that? And the Pope will tell you because I'm the only one that can talk to God. Right?
Whatever reason they come up with, right?
God. Yeah.
Whatever reason they come up with, they'll
Yeah.
tell you, I'm the only one who can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can, I'm the one who can save you. But even still, Randy, let's focus on this whole idea of individuals feeling like they have the solution, and
Yeah.
how all of a sudden it becomes a gateway to oppress other people in a
Yes.
way, right? Like, because think about this. If I say I know what's good for the planet, I want to create heaven on earth, it really is just your own heaven. As soon as you start to like want to implement it, you're infringing on some other person's heaven. And then all of a sudden you're back. It's no longer earth salvation, but it's a world war if you start to infringe on other people's spaces. And so
That's,
again, like I've imagined this in every which way possible. I'm like, we who are we're causing all the problems on this planet because we're trying to solve problems on this. We just need to like maybe sit still, right? And that's my heaven. And someone's
yeah.
like, I can't sit still. I got restless leg syndrome, and I'm here forcing them to sit still. Oh, let me not say forcing them, implementing, or instilling in your mind some inception type stuff, right? Plant seeds in your head, sit still. But it's totally true, Randy, with the whole, you end up back in the pyramidal shape. And I've seen this from my own personal experience, how when you're trying to gain attention, whether it's give yourself attention, you're going to move through different avenues. First, you're a Catholic, then you leave this church, then you go to this other church, then you go to this other one. And all of a sudden, soon you realize, man, that where else are you going to go? And then why are you even suffering yourself with all of this? Which is a good segue to this point. As above, so below, right? You hear that everywhere, in religious communities, in spiritual communities. I don't know how, I've never talked to an atheist at length about this. Maybe they believe the same thing or they don't, or if there's no above, there's certainly no below. But you hear this so many times. If you expand out to the universe, you're going to see aspects of the outer and the within. And we're here trying to save the planet, right? And you just wonder, but if we're mimicking what's out there, it's telling me that out there is not saved, right? Or am I wrong in assuming this?
No. We develop metaphors and stories and stuff to transmit information. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of my picked up a silver coin, maple leaf or something, 1 ounce of silver, and I stood it on edge, right on the countertop. That's the in between. It's like when you split something in half, duality, you actually end up with 3, right? You end up with the above and below, but you end up with the in between. If you look at what goes on, people try to expand the heads or the tails, we'll call it. Okay. You want to expand the in between. It gives you the greatest amount of space to be able to look in both directions, to be able to discern, through that comparison, right? And through the comparison of the right and the left, or the above and below, you start expanding your ability to interact with both. Okay, so that's what the saying is about, or the aphorism. Now, if I lay that coin down, and let's say it's heads up, then that's number one reality. And tails as a zero reality doesn't really exist. It's something that's outside my mind. It's outside my ability to contemplate. It's outside my ability to go to the library and run a book at it, because they banned all of them.
Randy, you always dropping.
Because there's several thousand years of history that have been banned from you looking at. Yeah. And we call it the occult, and we call them psychic, and we call them all these other things, which all religions hate, by the way, because that expansion of consciousness allows you to discern the truth. Okay. And then we take truth in the same absolute we take as a moment. And when we combine those two, we are very powerful at determining, kind of like, we'll just say, the way things are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, recognizing the way things are doesn't give us the ability to determine the way they should be. Okay. That becomes, we go from a deterministic universe, I determine the way things are, into a non-deterministic universe where I choose which way they are, right? And insanity lies in one of those, or both of them. We'll put that. But it's very entertaining. And so if you go away from the entertainment aspect, you really don't need attention. And here we go again, for ascension or salvation, or the myriad other benefits that somebody's going to propose to you by joining their cult. I'm still in favor of the mothership coming in behind Hale-Bopp and things like that, because that was imagination, that was creativity, right?
Absolutely. Entertainment, Randy. Entertainment. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Right. Yeah. In my book, following what I'll call my salvation experience, my awakening experience, right? Mm-hmm. I was going through all of these thoughts, and this was years ago in 2018. And one of the things I remembered is, in order to feel comfortable not worrying about anything, I had to sort of tell myself a story or program myself to understand, but why? Like, why are we doing all of this? If not for something more, like, what else is there? Like, there's got to be more. And in my limited human self, knowing all sort of kinds of rewards you can get as a human, and then trying to put that to the nth degree after you pass away and you're expanded, and you're thinking, oh, well, what's money when you've expanded? How much more money can you get? How much more of a big house can you get? How many wives can you get? How many kids can you see graduate high school and become, influential? Like, if you're trying to be expansive, what's the most, how much more at peace can you be? And then what happens when you're at peace for eternity? It becomes boring. And so entertainment became the only sort of thing funny. That made sense. I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is universal TV. Right. Because what else? Why else would you, if you were bored because you were always at peace, if you were in heaven and it was heavenly and you left to suffer, why would you do that? Other than, okay, maybe you learned something. Yeah, but it's also entertaining, because theoretically, they've got the Akashic records with books forever where everything's stored. You could sit there and learn it. You don't have to come here and do what we're doing. And so I end up with entertainment. God's bored. He needs to be entertained.
Yeah. As a child, you're not concerned with any of this, right? And then we go, well, what are your concerns? And we go, entertainment and attention, right?
My
And
daughter's milks. She just
yeah,
wants milk.
yeah. And
That's her
so,
concern.
but it's like that comes in the form of attention to her needs, right? And it comes in the form of entertain, meaning I've entertained myself by making the adults jump around and go get a job and buy me milk, right? Same thing for a dog or cat. I mean, nobody owns a dog or a cat. Cats and dogs own people, right? So
That's
that gets
it.
whole big thing about what that's going on with. But yeah, when we look at it, so what happens at that 7 or 8 years old thing is that in some way we have to start being more sophisticated in how we entertain ourselves and get attention. It's just that simple. So not realizing that we have all the energy we need and are capable of using by virtue of what we call being, by virtue of physicality, by virtue of number one, reality, all energy and zero reality can flow through that without restriction. And then what do? We start applying restrictions. You can only be this, you can only do that. And so that unlimited consciousness disappears, is what I call it. In its place, we accept authority. I tell people, who's your authority? Pick one. The president, right? Husband, child. I mean, you can
Randy
find
Veitenheimer
yeah,
for $9.95 a month.
yeah, 1990.
Oh, 1990. I was giving him a discount. Can you believe it? 50% off.
Be true to your word. 1995. Right?
1995. Yeah.
So anyway, when you look at all that, we would say, well, something was going on in that time period. And you can get into the physicality of it, brain development or whatever. You can get into the spiritual aspects of it. I become more interactive or knowing of the universe, or I mean, it's just all that is entertainment, okay? Because the true value of being human is the ability to act. It's just that simple. And so now we go into what we call the freedoms: the freedom to act, the freedom of thought, and the freedom of movement, okay? And if you take those three things and start looking at anything you're involved in and say, does this limit my freedom of thought? Does it interfere with my freedom of movement, right? Or my ability to express myself, freedom of action. So those have become very high, we'll call determinants of how you live your life. Because if they constrict it in any way, in any of those three and a few others, then I am imposing or allowing to be imposed on me through other authorities restrictions on existence or expansion of consciousness. And where they get you is like, oh no, you can't think that, okay? So, oh no, you can't do that, and oh no, you can't go there, right?
Yeah.
And so
let's build on that, Randy. Okay. This is an interesting question.
Okay, I went to the Maui and I rented a car. I'm going to admit to a problem. And on the map, on the rental car, it said you cannot go along the north shore of the island with this car. So I immediately drove out and drove all across the north shore of the island. Freedom of movement, right? I rented a car. I didn't die. No, what do you call it? Robbers occurred, or you know what I mean? And of course, I'm getting screamed at the whole time about you can't do that because somebody else in the car accepted the authority, and I had not. All right.
Randy was like, "Hold my beer. I'll be right back."
So
yeah.
Right. Anyway, go ahead.
No, speaking of being non-compliant or being compliant, right? With different sets of programming that either limit your expression, your thought, your movement, any of that. Within the spiritual community, there is also the idea that the planet is alive. And you hear many times that the planet itself, she, Mother Gaia, is going through an ascension process, right? I don't know if you've heard this, but it's out there.
I've heard all this. I heard
and this is quite literally a very common piece of information that's disseminated, especially within the ET channeling community. Right? If you're channeling ETs, they'll tell you, we're watching the planet. She's going through a change that has never been seen before. She's ascending in a manner that would allow those who have reached that level of vibration to ascend with her, and those who haven't to go to a different Earth or a different area of the universe where their vibration would match. Okay? A new Earth. Many people have talked about this.
Okay.
So it begs the question: if Mother Gaia is doing this, right? I'm sure you've imagine being in a. Let's use the Earth as an example. We're talking about her. You're on the Earth, and she's moving through space, right? Like, are we influencing that movement at all? And I'm using that to ask, if you are on maybe the Titanic, the captain was like, "We're turning right." What can you do as a guest to impact the ship turning right? Right. And so if the Earth is already moving through this sort of salvation or ascension, are we just coming along for the ride? And I mean, are we really impacting it is the question there.
Remember the concept of agency?
Yes.
Right. The idea is that you have resources. And now we'll go back to energy, and we'll take that down and call it information also. That it would allow you to influence another I, right? Moment to moment direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can tell you what direction we're headed. There's no signpost out in the universe that says we're headed up or down, right or left, forward or backwards. Nothing. They don't exist, right? So when you look at that, the other part of it is that anything that has physicality, which is matter, which gets into Planck's scale, and this is some research I did years ago, has consciousness. If it has any kind of physicality to it, it has consciousness, okay? But Planck's scale goes from, say, 1 to minus 36, and then I turn around and flip the polarity on it to 36 to 72 minus. And 1 is for number 1 reality, and the other one's for 0 reality, okay? So now we have reference points. We could eventually end up with up or down, right or left, or wherever the hell we're headed. The problem with Mother Earth is that if it has consciousness, it's your ability to interact with is very low. If you're Native American, you probably have a higher ability to interact, but not to the degree of we put one person versus, say, the mass of the Earth. And then we'll go, well, the consciousness of the planet versus the consciousness of one person. It's the same equation, okay? So the ability to influence it is, we would say, not to any great degree or any degree whatsoever, right? But there's an interesting concept that says that God and man share one talent, or one attribute is proper language, and that's the ability to bless you. So we say God has the ability to bless you, and I have the ability to bless you, and those are equal in the universe, right? It's an interesting aspect of consciousness. And so if I say I bless the earth, then I have executed something, right? Remember energy again. Mm-hmm. And to what degree that is sufficient is not knowable at a certain level. And I'll tell you why. Is that this earth has gone through so many cycles of being frozen solid like a rock and being burnt to hell, right? And that what makes you think we wouldn't go through it again, right? And so
that's a valid question with how
yeah,
long the humans have been
yeah.
interacting with the planet.
And
Like,
then we go, well, how many times is this cycle of destruction, creation going on? And again, not knowable, but we could test for it and say at least 9 times, 9 cycles.
No,
Yeah,
it's 6.
yeah,
It's 6.
yeah. So then we look at that and go, why are you even thinking about it? Right. And the answer is, well, I can entertain people on YouTube and get videos, and 1995 get people to come 29.
Come get instant salvation.
Yeah, 2,995, you can go to London in 3 days, have ascension, right? I mean, the inherent insanity is that you could go from where you are to some other place by the efforts of somebody else. So we throw that out the window, right? And then we come back to you can move yourself by yourself and only through yourself. That's it. And so anybody else just becomes an accessory. So am I an accessory to ascension? No. Am I an accessory to expansion? Yeah, it could be, right?
It could be. Yeah.
But I don't need attention for it, or I don't need acolytes, or what they call it, followers, I think is the latest one, right?
Oh, you need followers, Randy.
Oh, yeah.
You got a lot of followers. Maybe you don't need followers because you already have a lot of followers. It's like the person who is, like I said, things are all temporary. If you have a goal that you want to reach and you haven't reached it yet, and you're kind of obsessed about it, as soon as you do it, you're like, oh, what's the next goal? What's beyond ascension? That's really right. For a human, right?
Yeah. Because if it's what we call a vertical equation, right? And then ultimately there can't be an end to it, right? And that's the other thing. It's like you can only go so far as a limitation on your own consciousness. It may be a limitation on theirs, but not on mine, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can only ascend so far, how far can you descend? We'll throw that question out the window and don't never ask that, right? What if I fail at ascension, right? Be sure and join my course for $3,000 minus the 10% discount, and I will keep you from falling.
Well, I'll bring you back up after you've fallen, yeah. Randy. It's that's what we need to go after, is the people who failed their ascension. Like, this is that should be our target audience. Now, full circle, right? We're back. We've talked about all of this. We've talked about the fact that, it's kind of entertaining. Maybe there's nothing to fix. Maybe there is. It's all a program. If you decide you want to be on the ascension train, don't waver, right? Don't confuse yourself and others. Stand for it. Right. We've talked about.
Go ahead.
We've talked about sort of the structure that eventually gets created, which many times is an existing structure that you were maybe fed up with, that pushed you away to start to seek maybe some alternative source of remembering who you are, or seeking attention, right? Because, you end up creating barriers, limitations, you kick out the dissonance, etc. And then underlying all of this is the fact that eternity is sort of permeating all of these beliefs. We've always been. We will never die. This is all. And so I always go back to that. Why worry? Why worry? If you take away entertainment, right? Why worry? Okay, because it's entertaining. Cool. Let's take away entertainment.
Yeah.
Let's take away.
And today, it's like, what is there to worry about? And the answer is, if you have no degree of control over it, then you have no need to worry about it. And so the ration reason behind it is some degree of control means some degree of influence, some degree of agency. Here we go again. Some degree of ability to act, and once you get beyond that, then now you're into an unlimited universe, right? And so the idea of worrying is something that I learned to not do. Okay. It's all it's required of you at any given moment is what actions are available to you, right? And this goes back like at the beginning is the resource you have is your own consciousness, and if you can't remember who you are, right? If you can't come back to that, then now you're what we call dependent in the universe. You're in a dependent universe. And we all are to some degree.
To some degree, right? Yeah. I was going to say that.
Because of what we call interagency, right? The ability that we are a community. And but any formulation of any group or community automatically isolates and eliminates a lot of potential in the universe, and I'm not exactly for it. I'll put it that way, right? In college,
that's an interesting take.
Yeah, independence forever, not being in the fraternities or sororities. So
you can't get a leg up in the world if you're by yourself, Randy.
Yeah, well, if you're a non-participant in yourself, that's what we get down to. Yeah. So the yoga and meditation, martial arts, secret crap I learned was literally to provide you with yourself, right? I wasn't trying to provide you and the people I've taught. I'm not trying to provide them a religion. I'm not providing them an identity. I would prefer they have their own, right? And of course, those are the first things that are stripped away from you once you go into an ISM or into any of the other cult-like groups, right? So, my opinion.
So, yeah, no, well, your opinion is what I think salvation looks like. It's not a collective thing. It's an individual thing, right? It's oh, guess what? Your religion's your own. You created it.
Yeah.
Your healthcare is your own. I mean, before you create it, you more than likely are going to be dependent on maybe the existing healthcare structure. But soon enough, you're going to, if you are following this sort of what I call the prime directive, know thyself, express thyself, be thyself, eventually you're going to see that you can create your own healthcare. You can create your own schooling, your own meditation practice, your own religion. And I think that that's what salvation is. I don't think it's going to be a collective, whoa, we're all shifting all at once. I think you come to earth, you get your salvation, and then you take it somewhere else, maybe.
The idea I came up with is that it is possible to gain the strength of the self. Okay. And so we would say all meditation, all spiritual practices are to gain the strength of the self. And then at that level, you're a very powerful human being. Okay. That kind of power should not be expressed through limitations or even ideas like I should save the earth. Okay. It's too limited in a certain way. It's to deny reality, and any attempt to save the earth denies reality. That maybe the earth doesn't need to be saved, right? And we could say the same thing, walking down the street and go, "Nah, that person don't need to be saved." So now we go into judgment, and the strength of the self requires non-judgment. The strength of the self requires you to have your own energy and not need attention or entertainment from others, right? So
I'm gonna be what do you call here, like a troll?
Oh, good.
And isn't non-judgment judgment?
Yes, right. It's
I don't think it's one thing I talk about it with my family. I'm like, you were put on this earth to judge. You better judge.
Yeah. I like what one of my teachers said: judge and be judged. There ain't going to be no judgment day, right?
Yeah. You better judge.
I had to think about it, and then I was like, right. So I become extremely judgmental.
So it talks to what you talked about. I mean, it's the exact same thing you talked about earlier, where you said if you have an above and a below, then there's a middle. If you split it down the middle, you create a third thing, right? Like neutrality is not nothing. It's something.
No,
Non-judgment is something. It's a judgment. It's oh, I don't care, right? Like, which is also a judgment. Like,
see, like that, we come up with careful, carefree, right? You go out the door,
careless.
be careful.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody ever says go out the door, be carefree.
Yeah.
Come home great if you don't. And so careful, carefree.
Wait, did you just say come home great if you don't?
Yeah. So careless is something that we don't encourage in people, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so judgment falls in the category, here we go, of careless, right?
Man. I'm care neutral.
Yeah. My favorite one is
care half full.
Yeah. My favorite, I appointed myself a fashionista critic or whatever. And I would love to walk down the street, New York, DC, LA, and go, oh my God, do you own a mirror? Have you ever looked at judgment, right? And,
judgment.
And like, why are you so cruel? And I go, it wasn't me. I didn't dress that way.
Right? Listen, you said that as a joke. True story. I remember as a pharmacy intern, I went to work one day and one of the technicians asked me if I dressed in the dark.
I love that. That's one of the things I would say. See? And of course, you're having all these thoughts, and of course, I learned to not express them out loud. Look, just like everybody else.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Oh, I'm not judgmental. Oh, yeah? Look at that. Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. I just use my eyes to judge you. No, I think it's interesting. Like, I think we were put here to judge. It's how we make decisions on anything. Anyway, if you're watching this video right now, it was a judgment call. You're like, I could watch this. I like Randy. Let me watch it. Judgment right there.
Right.
Exactly. Like whatever you're eating today, whatever you're wearing today, whatever you're judgment.
I agree. Right. Judge and be judged. There ain't going to be no judgment day.
Ain't going to be no judgment. Yeah.
Hey, if there's no judgment day, there's no salvation, by the way.
Exactly. So that's another one. It's another one, right? Another one. But yeah, no, right. I think we've touched on so many topics here. I don't know what we've concluded, whether Earth's salvation is doomed. We'll just leave you to decide for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
The ET thing, real simple. Experience does not equal evidence. Okay. So you have millions of people, literally, that have seen and experienced UFOs, and they'll tell you about it. And remember, it's all the similarity, high correlation, like 88% correlation, all their experiences. That's a program. That's not an experience, right?
Yeah, but who's doing the programming?
Well, it's the same thing as saying I'm Catholic or Baptist or Democrat or Republican. It's what we call an evolved body of information, which I call an information set that you tap into. Okay. So now, the problem is, and I've stated this, I've never had one person come up to me and go, I have some ET people or an ET craft, and we're going to lunch. And you can bring as many people as you want, right? And we can look at the whole thing and have conversations. Like,
now, does that mean lack of evidence either?
It's lack of evidence. It is not that there. So you can have experiential knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ETs exist, but there is absolutely no evidence. And everybody goes, well, yeah, there's evidence. I've seen or I've heard, and, here we go, right? If that is true, all you got to do is park them on the lawn somewhere, Central Park, Washington, D.C. I know a couple places right on the mall, and you got plenty of room. You can invite people. You can sell tickets for $19.95.
Look at Randy. That's
around, right? And it's like
that falls in the realm. Huh? That falls in the realm of science, Randy.
Yeah, there's nothing out there, and number one reality, and zero reality. There is plenty of ET. That's the difference. There is so much things, angels, archangels, there's demons, there's entities, there's people that channel things, right? There's Ouija boards, there's the occult, all of that is over there. And it is expansive beyond belief. Remember the 99% of the universe, the 99% of reality. And so knowing all that, your question about ET is like, all you got to do is park one ship, park a dozen people from other planets, and let's have a conversation. And nobody will do that because they can't produce it, because all the ET stuff has been entertainment, my opinion. So,
your opinion, yeah.
Woo-hoo, right? Yeah. They just lost a couple thousand followers.
No, I don't think so. Hey, that's a judgment. You're entitled. That's what I say. You have to judge. And
I agree.
yeah, you have to judge, Randy. You have to judge. Yeah. No, Dale. For what it's worth, if you guys have enjoyed this conversation like you have other conversations, yeah, please subscribe, like. And if you have evidence of ET you'd like to show Randy, right, you know how to contact him. And he may pay you for this. Will you pay them $19.95 a month if they if they took you to lunch with your visitors?
I tell people, if anything about this conversation disturbs you, my email is energydoctor spelled with a K at me.com, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing about lately the conversation I've had. Science won't touch them. Science can't ask the question of why. Why do we exist, right? They can't even answer the question of where we came from, right? They can answer
Randy,
what, right? What is like numbers, right? And then we say all numbers is a primary way of lying, is through numbers. So when you take all that into effect, then the answer is be yourself and have a good day, right? Tell yourself I'm great. That's it. And you will move in an expansive way as opposed to an ascended way, right?
There you go. No, appreciate it, Randy. Appreciate it always. Yeah, guys, like, subscribe, share this video.
Yeah.
We've talked about whether or not Earth's ascension is doomed. And you've got your answers. To me, I don't think it is. I think it's individual. It's not going to be a collective thing. And I think it's happening. It's always happened. It'll always be happen. Earth always be happening. Earth is okay. We're visitors here. We're going to be gone. She'll survive somehow, some way, regardless of what we do, regardless of how much agency we have. Right. So, no, Randy, is always appreciated, man. Thank you so much.
I appreciate the ability to have these conversations. It's a lot of people don't want to go there, or they need to go there, and thereby to develop a better sense of who they are and where they come from, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate the heck out of it. Thank you very much, right? And,
likewise, sir.
Yeah, and send me more questions. I love these.
I will. It's I don't know what you want to call it, whether it's one day I'll be meditating, I'm like, oh man, I gotta talk about, I mean, we have all these questions all the time. And so it's actually really, really something I'm very grateful for, that I can, reach out to you randomly and say, hey, these are things I think it'd be nice to take an hour or so and talk about with you, and these are the topics. And it's interesting that you were thinking about time just recently too. So
yeah, I think
aging, time and aging.
Yeah, people have additional inputs, right?
Yeah,
additional perspectives, we'll call it, and of course that's expansive in nature. So there we go, right?
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I had a great time. All right.
Likewise. Thank you.
Right. Bye.